Hello, and welcome back to the Onward Shift Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest with us, Paul. Paul, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you, Vish. Thank you for having me as well.
My pleasure. Now, I'm really excited to actually understand and hear your story firsthand. You've been through gambling, weight loss, suicidal thoughts. You've had so many traumatic experiences as well as being neurodiverse. Can I understand who you are?
Yeah, of course. So I had a good upbringing, but it wasn't always as steady as maybe it should have been. So, for example, we, at the beginning, when up until I was about 10, we lived in England, lived with my mum, lived with my dad, lived with my brother, always had pets, cats, dogs, you name it, we've had it. We used to have a dog and a cat called Thunder and Lightning. We named them after each other, of course. And I think it was when I was about 10, I went to Japan. My dad's job took him there, so we went there for 2.5 years, me, my brother, and my dad. And the reason my mum didn't come was because she had multiple sclerosis. Now, for those of you who might not know about multiple sclerosis, it's there's different forms of it. Some of them are progressive, some of them get worse as you get older. And with multiple sclerosis, the heat massively affects the condition of that individual. So my mum coming to Japan wasn't really an option because it's incredibly warm in Japan and incredibly humid. And I think she made the right decision to stay here. And the beauty of what my dad's job had when we were in Japan was we got to travel back to England every half term. So we were traveling about 4, 5, 6 times a year to come back here. And it was part of my dad's package that my dad's company would pay for that. And we were incredibly lucky for it to be paid business class as well. I'm not sure the other passengers would agree that me and my brother running up and down the aisle was what they wanted, but we were a lot younger at that age, and we got to about when I was 12 and a half, and we had to come back because my dad's job was no longer an opportunity for him. So he changed companies out there, and sadly, they no longer had a job opportunity for him. So since we came back, we haven't lived that lavish lifestyle. We've lived on the majority of the time, we've lived on benefits. And I've gone from studying at a private school. Before I went to Japan, we went to a British school in Japan. And then when I came back, we went to a state school, but we went to a faith-stead state school. And we went to that faith state school not because I was religious, not because I'm a practicing Catholic, but because I was christened and then I was confirmed. I'm not a practicing Catholic. It's not something that I used to go to church when I was a little younger, but I couldn't
Mhm.
tell you the last time I went to church. So when I went to school, I've always struggled academically until until I got to college. So GCSEs wise, I came out of GCSEs with one C, and that one C was in music. I've since got my maths GCSE, but I did that. I failed it the second time, and then the third time I think it was that I managed to achieve it. And I had to go when I went to college. I had to do a level 2 course because I
Mhm.
didn't have enough GCSEs to get onto a level 3 course. So I did 3 years at college, and I did a BTEC level 2. And as soon as I found BTEC, that was where I needed to be. I needed to be doing coursework all year. I didn't need to be practicing for exams because I struggle retaining information
Mhm.
and keeping that information. So as soon as I found BTEC, it was almost a new education system for me because I've not done it before. Did my BTEC level 2, got the highest grades, BTEC distinction star. I did it for 1 year, and then I went to level 3 BTEC sport and level 3 BTEC performing arts. Performing arts I only did for 1 year.
Mhm.
Because I've always been incredibly overweight, my movement hasn't always been the best. I was born with dislocated hips as well, so it meant that there were challenges for me in terms of my flexibility.
Mhm.
But performing arts was yes, it was acting and music based, but it was also dance based as well. And couldn't dance, and I still can't dance to save my life.
Makes two of us.
I know, yeah, got two left feet, as they say.
That's exactly it.
Sport has always been probably my biggest passion, to be honest with you, and it's one of those areas that includes everyone. You don't need to be physically fit to play sport. You can do whatever exercise you like. The way that I see it is, I don't care what exercise you're doing if you're enjoying doing it. For example, it could just be going out for a walk in the rubbish weather that we've had over the last few days. That
Absolutely.
is sometimes enough. And if you're keeping yourself active as you can be, that is that helps your mental health and your mindset. But sport for me was where I was passionate about, and I left college with a distinction merit on a level 3 BTEC sport course. And considering on the level 2 course, I was told by probably the teacher I was closest to, I was told, you're not going to get onto a level 3 course. You're not going to achieve this, and you're not going to get to university and do X, Y, and Z. You're not going to graduate university. That really was a moment that has stuck with me, because a lot of the time I've been doubted throughout my life, but I've always done my best to prove people wrong. And I've proved that teacher that I was closest to, I proved him wrong, because I left college with that distinction merit on my level 3, and then I went to university. And at the end of university, I graduated with a second class honours degree, a 2-2, and a high 2-2 as well. So I'm incredibly proud of what I've achieved. But
Hmm.
going to university for me was an incredibly difficult experience. And the reason it was difficult was because I had to do everything for myself at university. I'd gone from living with my mum and dad, having to
Hmm.
do absolutely nothing, to going to university, having to manage my own money, having to basically do life. So simple life skills. So doing my own washing, things like that, cooking for myself. Yeah, just doing
Just
things for
doing the
myself.
day-to-day things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just the day-to-day things that people take for granted, that actually, not that I was struggling with my mental health, but if you are struggling with your mental health, those are the sort of things that you can really struggle with. And it's only because of the job that I now do that I've sort of realized how much people can struggle with certain things. And I didn't think it was like that at all. But university for me, and going there for the first year, was a very overwhelming experience. And I'd gone from doing a BTEC level 3 course, coursework based only, to doing an honours degree, which included exams. And I felt very overwhelmed doing that. And what I decided to do, with support from friends and family, and particularly people at university, I decided to do a foundation year. So that was an extra year at university, and that was a 4-year course. The 1 year foundation year, 3 years on my honours degree. And that was probably the best decision that I made, because it meant that, so when you go to university, it's almost like I had two first years. And because my first year was the foundation year, second year was my first year on the honours degree. And it was you just had to pass. You just had to get that 40% mark, and that's all I got. And I enjoyed my time at that time. I probably went out 3 or 4 nights a week. And a lot of the time it was after I'd be working. So I used to work in nighttime promotion for the student union events, as well as working for student events. And that was it was such a good job, and such a lovely job to have doing that, to be honest with you.
So, cool. That's where things it was university for you, wasn't it? Where things started changing, and those changes want that positive. And I believe that's where your gambling addiction
It
really
is, yeah.
ignited. So, how how have you gone from what sounds as if a a fairly normal, pleasant upbringing with two parents and pets and siblings to, smashing through college, ending up in university, outdoing everything your teachers said you wouldn't do.
Mm.
You sound like you're living life really well. You're going out, you're mingling, but then how does it all change? How does it all turn upside down?
So I was living life, and I was living life to the absolute max at the time. And for me, it was probably the first or second week of freshers where I walked into a bookmaker's and I put down my first ever £5 accumulator, I would say. And that £5 accumulator changed my life because it meant that I didn't win a massive, I said I didn't win a massive amount of money. I won about £450 off that accumulator. And I thought to myself, what are you doing? Why are you not? You're literally associating sport with making money. And I would be watching that sport anyway. So it was a win-win for me. It was just me adding even more excitement to me watching sport. So my gambling addiction didn't really kick off at university because at university I was very limited to how much I could spend. It was very how much I could afford to spend, as well as paying my bills as well for the first time in my life. And I would work a lot more at university than I maybe I wanted to or I should have done, and that was so I could feed that gambling habit. But gambling then became part of my routine. And being neurodiverse and having ADHD meant that I needed a routine. And I formed my life around, when I left university, I formed my life around my gambling addiction. So once I left university, I started working as a teaching assistant in a special needs school locally to me. And I was there for about 6 months. And after my after my probation meeting, they said to me, we're not keeping you on because of a few reasons, my punctuality, but also I wasn't fully focusing on the job. The reason I wasn't punctual was because I was gambling instead of sleeping, often late at night. And that's the problem when you're gambling. So when you're gambling, you often do it on your own and you often do
Mm.
it when you're not around people. Yes, you might put the odd bet down when you're out with friends or watching Super Sunday or Soccer Saturday, but a lot of my gambling and a lot of everyone's gambling is them doing it on their own or them doing it in secret. It's known as a hidden addiction
Mm.
because alcohol, smoking and drugs you can see side effects from. That gambling, you need to pay attention to someone's behavior more to notice their change in behavior and to notice they're becoming addicted to something. So it got to the point when I was that teaching assistant where I was asking my dad every day to give me a lift to work. And work was the town next door to me. It was a £3 train journey. I didn't have £3 because I'd spent it gambling. And I was borrowing money left, right, and centre, borrowing money from friends, family, payday loans, things like that, get myself into my overdraft. I knew that my overdraft was going to start charging me after a certain period, but I was thinking to myself, just pay it off next month, pay it off next month. And I didn't ever pay it off until I got to grips with my addiction. And even then, I didn't pay it off.
So, Paul, quick one. It's really interesting because you say you have ADHD. Now, I've also got ADHD and I've got OCD, so I can really understand the whole needing a routine because it really does, it plays a huge part in your day-to-day life. But the thing that I'm really interested in here is understanding, because ADHD, for me, I can hyper focus or hyper fixate on things. And I can imagine gambling with the lights they use and the noises they make, and it becomes very, very addictive. How did you manage that with ADHD? Because gambling and ADHD is definitely not a great combination
No.
as you have experienced.
And I think it's not spoken about enough, the amount of people that
Really?
are neurodiverse. And with all of the work that I do, what you've just mentioned is exactly the points that I raise. You become fixated on, it could be a word that's there. It could be,
Yeah.
let's say there's a dot on the poster. You can become fixated on that. And for me, that a lot of the promotional material that these companies offer are to do with slots and to do with casinos. And when I was going, and I wouldn't regularly go to the casino or regularly bet on the slots, but for me, when I did go, I would regularly come out of that casino or regularly come out of the. It was always a casino. I didn't go regularly, but I would always come out when I would be slightly up, even slightly up, sometimes up massively. But friends would say to me, "You're quite good at this, aren't you?" And I would say, Yeah, I've won a lot of money, but I sort of played it down because
Mm,
it wasn't where my interest was. You mentioned hyperfixation. My hyperfixation was gambling on sport, and
mm,
that was where I did 97, 98% of my gambling on sport. And it would be, I would become fixated on, I'd gone from, to begin with, I just started betting on results and win, loss, draw, things like that. And then it would be things like corner bets and the most obscure bets that I could put down. And being neurodiverse, like I'm not massively neurodiverse, but for me, I the experience that I had was that I would orientate my whole life around my gambling addiction. That be my diet, that be absolutely everything, because that was what I was fixated on doing. That was what I knew I needed to keep doing to carry on going through life. And that those 11 years, I don't regret them, but I I've learnt a lot since then, and I don't regret anything in my life because I have always learnt from it. So
mhm.
if I've learnt from it, then I've always continued to carry on trying to be a better person or trying to make amends for what I've done before or something like that.
Yeah,
That's what my calling is now, I'd say. And that's why I do the job that I'm doing at the moment, which is helping people with mental health that were struggling. I'm now helping them and getting them the support that ultimately they need and ultimately they deserve.
of course. So when you say like spent 97, 98% of your time on sports gambling, so what was the final, like, do you know how much you've actually spent on gambling and what are some of the wins and what are some of the losses you've experienced?
I've estimated that I spent about £100,000 gambling. And the reason that I say that is because the majority of my salary went on gambling. And then I would be using credit cards, I'd be using payday loans, I'd be using things like that. And over the course of my gambling, at worst, my gambling debt was £3,000. But over the course of it, that happened a few times. Over the course of it, it was about £10,000 in the end. And the probably the biggest win that I ever had was £2,000. The biggest loss that I ever had was that same £2,000. So I put that whole amount of money, which could have cleared my debt that I was in at the time, I put it all on what I thought was a dead set to win because it was a
Mhm.
1 to 10 shot at the time. And a 1 to 10 shot is a massive favourite. And it was a darts player. And I got the same feeling when I used to win and when I used to, it was a different type of feeling, but it was the same feeling when I won and lost. When I lost, my heart would sink and my heart would skip a beat almost. And I would then think to myself, I wouldn't think to myself, my impulsive action next was to chase my losses, get that money back that you've just spent. And
Mm,
if I was winning and I'd won something, it would be my heart would still be racing up until
mhm.
the result settled. And then after it settled, I'd then be like, right, let's put another bet down. What are you going to bet on next? Very rarely did I I withdrew that money often, but when I'd withdrawn that money, I'd then end up spending it again. I wouldn't put it into a different account. So it was a very vicious cycle. Whatever I won, I'd lose. Whatever I lost, I then needed to recoup through spending on my credit card. At the time, you could have gambled on your credit card. And towards the end of my addiction, they put a ban on credit cards, but it was that doesn't stop you from gambling. Because what I used to do then is I used to get myself into more debt by putting my credit card into an ATM, getting the money out, putting it into my current account, and then spending that money. So for me, if there was a will to gamble, there was a way to gamble. So if you're going through an addiction, you'll always find a way to do something. Gambling is something you can do providing you've got the money available to you 24/7. Sadly,
Absolutely.
alcohol, drugs, and smoking, you can only do if you've got it in the house. Yes, you can order things, but if you're ordering something, that takes time to be delivered to you, doesn't it? So you're not always going to be, yes, you might be drunk when you've had alcohol, for example, but you've got to wait for your next drink, for example. Sometimes you've got to wait for the alcohol to be delivered, or sometimes you might pass out on the sofa. With gambling, even on Christmas Day, you can gamble on. I could have gambled on the Saudi Arabian Football League, which I used to do. I used to do that regularly. It wasn't because I knew anything about it, because I have never been to Saudi Arabia. Know nothing about it. It was more, what am I going to do with my time if I'm not gambling? Which that's how I saw it at the time.
So it's almost become a hobby at this stage.
Yes, it did. It did become a hobby, and it was probably my hobby. That and sport were probably my hobbies at that time. And it became something that wasn't a healthy hobby. So I often get asked, the amount you go to the gym now, do you see that as an addiction? And I say, no, I don't see it as an addiction, because what I've done is I've replaced gambling with a healthy habit. So I was going to the gym 7 days a week. I'm now going 4 days a week because of operations that I've had, but I want to be there. Whereas with my gambling, yes, I wanted to gamble at the time, but was I thinking logically? No, I wasn't. And it's very difficult, the gambling for me for just over 10 years, just under 11 years, and spending as much money as I did. I can't turn back time. So I can't say, yes, I'm not going to say I regret the money that I spent, because of how much I've grown since then. But I wish I'd spent it differently, or I wish I hadn't become addicted to gambling like I did for just over 10 years.
Well, and I think that that's a very positive way of thinking about it, and that's special within itself because a lot of people will be defeated by that. But it sounds as if you, Paul, have kind of looked back, addressed and assessed the situation and found a positive in it. And now that you're speaking about it, the hope is always to reach one person, just give one person a golden nugget, and they can go seek the help and the support that they need. And I think
Yeah.
that's the next thing I really want to understand. How did you step away? How did you get away from gambling addiction?
So it was something so simple that happened. So I didn't regularly go into bookmakers, but I walked into a bookmakers on this occasion, and I must have put down a 10, £20 accumulator, which in the grand scheme of things wasn't a lot of money for me in terms of my gambling. And I walked out of the shop and I got spotted by my friend. So one of my friends, he put in our group chat, he said to me, I thought you'd stop gambling. I just saw you come out of Coral. And my best friend then called me, understandably, quite surprised and like irritated. And he said, what's this? You've been gambling? And I said, I'm out at the moment. I said to him, yes, I have been gambling. I'm out at the moment. I'm going to go home shortly in the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and I'll call you back when I get home. So it was a very long day for me that day because I needed to assess what I wanted to do. And I needed to assess what I would, not just what I wanted to do, but what I was going to do. That day, I contemplated taking my own life because of the guilt and the shame that I felt around the gambling addiction. But that is the problem. When you're going through a gambling addiction, you do feel guilty with what you're doing, but you continue to do it because you don't know anything else. And the first thing I did when I got home, I didn't call my best friend. I called my employee assistance program at my previous employer. And my employee assistance program, I didn't expect them to do this, but they are supposed to be that beacon of hope for you. But when I contacted them, they said to me, you need too much help. And for a professional organization, for them to turn around and say, you need too much help was probably the worst thing they could do to anyone. If I wasn't so of the mindset, so determined to overcome my addiction like I was,
Mm.
that was when I really questioned whether or not I was making the right decision. And after that, I contacted GamCare. GamCare are the leading professional organisation helpline for gambling and gambling, the National Gambling Helpline. And they put me in touch with my local provider. Every area has a different provider. Every provider does offer something different. So my local provider is Break Even. They offer CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, whereas you talk about a different organization, for example, Epic Restart, they offer you opportunities to go away on retreats and things like that. And one size doesn't fit all. So
Hmm.
what worked for me might not work for the next person. And it's about making the support as accessible as we can so that
Absolutely.
people who are neurodiverse ultimately do reach out for that support.
So sorry, Paul. It's really interesting because I actually agree with you on the employees assistance programs. I think that the support they offer is very artificial, it's very surface level, and a lot of people who are at that stage of needing that support and having to use an employee assistance program, it's usually desperate times and they need support, which is going to be beneficial. But what I find really interesting about your story is after your knockback with the employee assistance program, you plucked up the courage to then ask help again. Because a lot of people feel defeated after the first time.
Yeah.
What is it that made you feel I need to continue going? I need to go to GamCare. Like, what was it that pushed you to try again?
I think it comes back to me as a person, how
Hmm.
determined I am, and how determined I was to do that level 3 course and to do that
Hmm.
university course. Actually, that teacher that I did that level 2 course with said, you're not going to get there.
Hmm.
That's what started and really spiraled me to wanting to prove him wrong. So I wanted to prove them wrong again. And it's about, as a family, we haven't had it easy, but we also haven't had it hard either. We've had difficult times. Every family's had difficult times. And it's about how we move forward as a family. And we've always moved forward. I think I've always taken everything for granted. But
Hmm.
that day itself was the day that changed my life because
Really?
Break Even offered me 6 sessions, 6 CBT sessions. That's exactly what my employee assistance program could have offered me. The fact is, my employee assistance program had no idea how to deal with a gambling addiction, whereas Break Even, they did. And
Hmm.
I've done a lot of work with Break Even since in different organizations, and all of the organizations in the Gambling Harms Field want to make their support services as accessible as they can. 2025 for me was when I started speaking on a public platform, not sharing just on my social media, but I've shared so much last year, and I continue to share a lot, and I continue to work with different organizations. And something that I've said this year, an ambition of mine, is to work with 2 new organizations, because it means for me, if I'm working with these organizations, it means for me that I'm helping them reach people. I'm not just helping them reach people, but Bet No More actually asked me to tell them how to make their service more accessible. And that is a compliment in itself, because it means that they think I know what I'm talking about.
Of course.
And I've said to them, to be honest with you, I might know what I'm talking about, but I didn't experience this. I was very, my addiction wasn't really someone that there were elements of me being neurodiverse in my addiction, but also I didn't become fixated on the big words that a lot of people did. I didn't become fixated on the colours, on the advertising material, and these gambling companies know what they're doing. They are bright colours, and that attracts people in itself. And it's almost like reverse psychology what they're doing, saying to you, don't chase your losses. If you're going through an addiction, you're going to do the opposite to what someone's telling you to do. Because I was often told by friends and family, stop gambling. You can't stop gambling until you're ready to. You need to. I don't care what someone says to me. If I'm not ready to overcome that addiction, I'm not doing it, because you can do things for other people, but you also need to do things for yourself, which is what I've done over the last 3 years. I've prioritized a little bit of self recovery and building a better person that I am today.
It's incredible. And something you did touch on just a little bit there was you've been on a weight loss journey, and I'd love to know what weight you was at, because I know this is a huge achievement for you, and I'm excited for people to hear about this, where you are today and where you want to be with it.
So the first time, the day that I became my gambling addiction, I also decided that my weight needed to be addressed. I tried with my weight so many times about stopping eating certain foods and things like that, and Ryvita diets, things like that, Herbalife, things like that. And I started on the 15th of January 2023 at 130 kilos. I think that's about 20 stone. At my lowest, which I was just before I had my hip replacement, I was 75 kilos, which is 55 kilo, a loss of 55 kilos. Now, I'm not at that weight now. That was the weight that I wanted to be, and that was the weight that I wanted to stay at. But I'm not going to use it as an excuse, because I'm sick of making excuses for behavior that I've shown and that's not me taking accountability for it. I had a hip replacement, and there's been complications with that hip replacement. So it's meant that I haven't been able to be physically active like I would have wanted to. But it's not because I haven't been physically active that I've gained all the weight. It's because when I wasn't going to the gym every day, or going to the gym 3-4 times a week, that changed my mindset of I'm going to start eating rubbish again. Not as much rubbish as I was eating before, but start eating the food that isn't good for you. So at my heaviest, when I was 130 kilos, my gambling was my priority. And I orientated my diet around my gambling. My breakfast used to be quite good. This was when I was at my heaviest. It used to be a couple of bits of fruit in the morning, And then lunch, this is enough food to last someone a whole day. And I was eating it in an hour's break. So I go to the shop at the top of my road. I drive there as well. It's a 2-minute walk. And I would buy a fizzy drink, a sandwich, 2 pasties, so sausage roll, Cornish pasty, things like that, 2 pastries, a croissant, things like that, pain au chocolat, things like that, and a share bag of crisps. And I would eat all of that in an hour. And I'm embarrassed the fact that I was even able to eat all of that food in the space of an hour. That food should have lasted me at least a day or two, or a day and a half. And what it was for me was it was about changing my relationship with food. So I began on the journey by myself, and then I went to a friend's barbecue, and my weight had stalled a little bit. And a friend said to me, "Would you consider liposuction?" And I thought to myself, why has he said that? And then I was thinking, clearly, I've stopped doing what I need to be doing. And then another friend said to me, he said, "You can't put a price on your health." That to me sort of spurred me then to getting an online coach. So I worked with an online coach for a year and a half. And with that online coach, it was about just over £200 a month I was paying each month. But people said to me around me, they said, "Why are you paying this guy so much money?" And I said to them, for accountability, because if I was spending that money on him, it meant I then was benefiting myself. The problem with working with him was the fact that you can't put a price on your health, but it was almost like once we had a plan, we didn't change that plan. So I was paying that £200 a month to be accountable to someone. Whereas what I could have done is, the way that I was looking at it is, I could have paid a friend of mine £200 a month to be accountable to them. And it has changed my mindset, because I've now recently, so I'm currently 83.3 kilos, and I want to get back to 75 kilos. And when I get back to 75, that means that I've lost half my body weight. It was always 75 was always the target that I wanted to be at. And to lose 55 kilos in 2 years is quite remarkable, actually.
That's phenomenal.
I don't know why I had 75 in my head, but I did. And I've since let myself go, as I said, but I'm back in the right groove. I'm back getting down to where I want to be. The heaviest I've been since the 75 was when I was 85 kilos. And it's not easy. The weight loss was harder than overcoming the gambling addiction, because a gambling addiction, all I needed to do was change my view and disassociate sport and gambling. I say all I needed to do. It wasn't easy. I just had to do it. Your weight loss, I've been doing it. I did it for a solid 2 years, and then I'm now back doing it again, and I'm back in a good mindset because of my friends and family and the support that they've shown me, but because of the value that my job is also putting on me. Like, I've just started a new job 2 months ago, and I've settled in so well to that new job, and they've all said it as well. And they've all said to me, "You've really got to grips with our system and everything." And I've said, I'm a quick learner, but also I've learned so much over the last 3 years, just to be patient, with a process. And that's what I've done. I've been patient with my gambling addiction. I still think about gambling all the time. The difference is I'm not acting on my impulses. I've been patient with my weight loss. And the hardest thing for me in my gambling addiction was having that open and honest conversation with my friends and family. That was the most
Mhm.
overwhelming thing. Once I'd done it, it was the most rewarding thing I'd done, because I apologized to everyone. I think I sent similar messages to everyone. I said, I can't believe I'm saying this to you, but I've been addicted to gambling for as long as I have been. And I feel guilty. I feel shameful about it. And not one of them blamed me. All of them very much had the same response: get yourself better and work on yourself. And that's what I've been doing for the last, I was doing it for a solid 2 years and then stopped doing it when I had the operation. But I'm back to doing it again, and I'm back to enjoying my life like I should be, like everyone should be. An addiction shouldn't stop you from enjoying your life. It didn't. It stopped me from doing certain things, but it didn't stop me from enjoying myself. I'll put it that way.
Sure. Honestly, Paul, you've got such an incredible story, and it's such a roller coaster of a ride from your childhood to, from your childhood end up in Japan all the way back to UK and your university, and it's just been an absolute roller coaster of a ride.
Yeah,
I know we're coming to the end of the podcast, so there's two questions I've got for you. And
please.
the first one is, what advice would you give someone who has got gambling addiction or is struggling with it? What's the first bit of advice you'd give them?
That they're not alone. So a friend of mine who gambled, she said to me, she said, I've got a gambling addiction. I spend £100, £200 a month. And I said, the first thing I said to her was, I don't care how much you spend. You've told me you've got a gambling addiction. Let's get you support. And she reached out for support. And for one reason or another, she didn't take that support. But what she said to me was, I reached out to her recently and she said, I haven't gambled since we've spoken because of the value that you've put on me, because
Mhm,
you've made me feel important and you've made me feel like I wasn't on my own. And
mhm.
addictions can take over anyone at any time in their life, but it's about realizing that there is more to life than having an addiction. And the hardest thing is reaching out for help. But once you've done it, you'll be so proud of yourself, and it's the bravest thing you can do, reaching out for help. And it shows a lot of you as a person if you reach out for help and support.
I absolutely agree with that 100%. And the last question I've got for you today, Paul, is how are you? Are you okay? Because it sounds like you've been on such a journey. How are you today?
I'm incredibly humbled by all of the opportunities that I get given, and this is my recovery. My recovery is encouraging people to overcome their challenges in life, and the way that I see it is, you don't just walk through a brick wall. If you've got challenges in front of you and you overcome them, you've smashed through them. And sometimes, if you're struggling with an addiction, mental health, something like that, just waking up is sometimes the hardest thing to do. But if you wake up and get out of bed, that is sometimes, give yourself credit for doing something so simple. Because if you've started your recovery journey, you've done more than someone that isn't ready to start their recovery journey. And if you're not ready to start your recovery journey, that's fine. When you are ready, please reach out for help, because whether you reach out to me for signposting or other organizations, there are so many organizations that offer free support to people that don't get used enough. And we need to use them more and more, because otherwise they disappear.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Paul. It's been such a pleasure having you on the Onward Shift podcast. And thank you. Yeah, just genuinely, thank you so much for being so open, vulnerable, and honest.
Thank you for having me, Vish, and thank you everyone for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Honestly, the more people we reach, the more support we can offer. And don't forget, Onward Shift isn't just a podcast. We've got a number of resources on our website, so please don't forget to check out www.onwardshift.com, where you'll find counsellors, keynote speakers, coaches, blogs, and so much more. Until next time, don't forget to keep having these important conversations.